Chosen one, on August 26th, someone close to you may reveal a betrayal, and the instruction is not to react quickly, but to remain silent long enough to see clearly. You may already feel the change in a familiar voice, the delay in a reply, or the strange tension that enters a room before anyone speaks. Your shoulders tighten because part of you senses that something is being concealed. You have been asking whether your uneasiness is wisdom or fear. You have wondered if loyalty has been quietly replaced by convenience. Silence does not mean weakness, and it does not mean pretending that nothing happened. Sometimes silence is the space where truth loses its disguise. If you have felt a season becoming heavier without knowing how to name it, the 7 Principles of C.S. Lewis for the Chosen can help you recognize what this season may be teaching, why the tension matters, and how to respond without panic. To access the ebook, go now to the top of the comments and click the link in the pinned comment. Then return to this message with a quieter heart, because the purpose is not to make you suspicious of everyone, but to help you become attentive without becoming afraid. Someone may disappoint you, but their behavior does not have authority over your character. You may notice the warning first in your body. You wake before the alarm, reach for your phone, and see a message that feels ordinary until you read it twice. The words are polite, but the warmth is gone. You place the phone face down, yet your hand returns to it minutes later. At work, you listen to a conversation and realize that information was shared with everyone except you. In your home, a familiar person moves around you with a distance that cannot be explained by fatigue alone. Your breathing becomes shallow, your jaw tightens, and you begin building explanations before you possess enough facts. This is where betrayal can injure you twice. First, through what another person may have done, then through the mental storm that begins when you try to solve the entire matter in one night. You do not have to expose every hidden motive before morning. You do not have to answer a painful message while your emotions are still burning. You can notice the signal without surrendering your peace to it. The meaning of this date is not that heaven has guaranteed a betrayal on a specific day. It is a call to reflection, discernment, and renewed obedience when trust feels uncertain. August 26th can become a marker for asking what your silence is protecting, what your words might accidentally reveal, and whether your next response will come from wisdom or wounded pride. You may need to distinguish a genuine pattern from one isolated misunderstanding. You may need to recognize when a relationship requires a boundary rather than another explanation. You may need to accept that closeness does not always equal loyalty, while remembering that disappointment does not make every person dangerous. You may need to stop chasing reassurance from someone who benefits from keeping you confused. This message can help you slow down, examine the evidence, protect what is entrusted to you, and speak only when your words can serve truth. The goal is not to become cold. The goal is to become clear without allowing another person's disloyalty to turn your heart into a permanent courtroom. Imagine a familiar afternoon. You are standing in the kitchen while water runs into the sink and a notification appears on the screen beside your keys. The message is brief. Someone you trusted has repeated something you shared privately, altered a detail, or allowed you to look foolish in a room where you expected protection. For a moment, the kitchen seems too small. The hum of the refrigerator becomes noticeable. You read the message again, hoping the meaning will change. Then the inner voice begins, "Answer now." Another voice follows, "Make sure they regret it." A third voice, quieter but steadier, asks you to wait. You set the phone down. You place both hands on the counter. The pause feels unbearable because anger wants movement, while wisdom often begins with restraint. In that pause, you discover that the betrayal is not only about what happened, it is also about who you will become while responding to it. A person may have carried your confidence into the wrong room, but you do not have to carry their disorder into every room that follows. You have likely experienced waiting without understanding what the waiting means. You pray for clarity, but the answer does not arrive in the form you expected. You wonder whether a closed conversation means closure, preparation, redirection, or simply the need for patience. You may feel tempted to interpret every silence as abandonment, especially when the person involved once felt like a safe place. Yet silence can reveal what constant conversation concealed. It can show whether someone reaches for you only when they need access, whether they value you only when you are useful, or whether the distance has another explanation that honest dialogue can uncover. Many readers who arrived feeling confused or tired of waiting said the material helped them understand their season more clearly, organize their prayers, or stop interpreting every silence as abandonment. If you want a grounded way to distinguish waiting from preparation, closure from redirection, and rebuilding from a new beginning, The 7 Principles of C.S. Lewis for the Chosen offers language for reflection without pretending to know every hidden purpose. To access the ebook, go now to the top of the comments and click the link in the pinned comment. Then come back to the question beneath the pane. What is this moment asking you to stop forcing? The answer may not be an immediate confrontation. It may be the courage to observe what becomes visible when you stop rescuing the relationship from its own patterns. Opposition often arrives through false urgency. It tells you that if you do not respond immediately, you will lose control of the situation. It tells you to send the long message, reveal everything you know, and gather allies before the other person can explain themselves. It pushes you toward comparison, reminding you of every time you were overlooked and every person who seemed to receive more honor than you did. But urgency is not always discernment. Sometimes it is pain demanding an audience. Sometimes it is fear trying to prevent you from feeling powerless again. A hurried answer may give temporary relief, while creating consequences you must carry for months. A restrained answer may feel unsatisfying because it does not provide the emotional release your wounded heart wants. Still, you are allowed to protect your future from the version of yourself that speaks only to punish the past. The quiet instruction is not to ignore betrayal. It is to refuse to let betrayal dictate the timing, tone, and reach of your response. Joseph knew what it meant to be betrayed by people close enough to know his dreams and familiar enough to wound him deeply. His brothers did not misunderstand him by accident. They acted from jealousy and fear, and their actions changed the course of his life. Yet the early silence around Joseph was not proof that his life had been forgotten. He was carried through rooms where he had no control, placed among people who did not understand his story, and required to remain faithful before anyone could see the meaning of his formation. Your ordinary life may not resemble Joseph's circumstances, but the inner temptation can be similar. You may want to explain yourself to every person who received a distorted version of events. You may want to force recognition from people committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, let your daily faithfulness become louder than the rumor. Keep doing the work in front of you. Keep your speech clean. Keep your private life aligned with what you claim to believe. The person who betrayed your confidence may control a moment, but they do not have to control the direction of your life. The cost of ignoring this signal is not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like repeating the same relationship with different names. You keep over-explaining your boundaries, forgiving without observing change, and offering private access to people who have not demonstrated care. You call the discomfort compassion because admitting the pattern would require a difficult decision. You remain available to those who treat your availability as an entitlement. Eventually, your peace becomes exhausted from performing trust where trust has not been earned. You begin doubting your own judgment, not because you lack wisdom, but because you keep overruling what wisdom has already shown you. Ignoring the pattern can also make you harsher than necessary. When you refuse to acknowledge one person's disloyalty, you may begin distrusting everyone. The healthier path is neither denial nor suspicion. It is honest attention. You can say, "This happened." You can ask what it means. You can change access without announcing revenge. You can grieve what was real while accepting that the relationship may no longer be safe in the same way. So when this message says that someone close may betray you on August 26th, receive it as an invitation to watch, not a command to accuse. Let the date remind you to guard your speech, examine repeated behavior, and resist the urge to reveal everything simply because you feel exposed. If a conversation becomes necessary, enter it with facts instead of assumptions. If distance becomes necessary, create it without theatrical punishment. If an apology comes, listen for responsibility rather than emotion. If no apology comes, let the absence of accountability inform your boundaries. Type the words 888 in the comments as a simple confirmation that you will choose clarity over panic, and then return to the message. The code is not a formula, and your words do not control spiritual outcomes. They simply mark the decision you are making in your own heart. You are not being asked to predict betrayal. You are being invited to remain awake enough that betrayal does not make you betray yourself. The deeper conflict may be internal. You may have learned to equate love with unlimited access, patience with endless postponement, and forgiveness with pretending that trust has already been restored. You may fear that a boundary will make you seem bitter. You may worry that silence will be interpreted as guilt. You may have spent so much time proving that you are not difficult that you stopped asking whether the relationship was treating you with dignity. These patterns do not make you foolish. They may have developed because you wanted peace, because you were taught to endure, or because previous rejection made you eager to preserve every connection. But peace purchased through self-abandonment is not the peace you are being called to protect. A boundary is not a declaration that someone has no value. It is a truthful statement about what access requires. You can honor another person's humanity without handing them unrestricted influence over your thoughts, decisions, and private wounds. Recognition alone is not enough when your heart knows a pattern, but your habits keep feeding it. You need a practical way to pause before answering, examine what has actually happened, and choose a response that remains faithful after the emotion fades. When the mind keeps replaying a conversation and the body prepares for another conflict, guided reflection can help you separate evidence from imagination, fear from direction, and grief from responsibility. The 7 principles of C.S. Lewis for the chosen can serve as a companion while you pray. Examine your motives and identify the next faithful step without reacting from panic or passivity. It is not a substitute for wisdom, counsel, or honest conversation, but it can help you apply this message to the decisions waiting in front of you. To access the ebook, go now to the top of the comments and click the link in the pinned comment. Then return to your present situation and ask what obedience looks like in the next 24 hours, not what dramatic answer would make everyone finally understand you. The next step may be small, but small obedience can interrupt a large pattern. Your mind may be gathering details while your body is sounding an alarm. These are related, but they are not identical. A tense stomach does not prove that someone intends to harm you. A calm feeling does not prove that a relationship is healthy. Spiritual recognition should not require you to reject reason, and careful reasoning should not require you to silence every inner concern. Write down what you know, what you suspect, and what you still need to learn. Notice whether your conclusion depends on one message or a repeated pattern. Ask whether another trustworthy person would see the same facts or only hear the intensity of your interpretation. Pray honestly, without dressing anger in religious language. You can tell God that you feel betrayed before you know the whole story. You can ask for wisdom without demanding a sign that confirms your preferred outcome. When mind, body, and spirit are given room to speak without one controlling the others, your response becomes less frantic. Clarity grows where honesty and patience meet. Discernment also changes the way you look at relationships and environments. It does not make you suspicious of every friend, family member, or co-worker. It teaches you to observe how people handle information, correction, responsibility, and your success. Someone may make a mistake and respond with humility. Someone else may repeat the same harm, deny the facts, and accuse you of being sensitive for noticing. Those responses matter. You do not need to label a person forever in order to adjust the role they occupy in your life. A colleague may remain a colleague without becoming a confidant. A relative may be loved without being trusted with every private detail. A friend may be forgiven while the relationship is rebuilt slowly through consistent actions rather than emotional promises. Even your environment can shape your reactions. If every conversation around you rewards gossip, retaliation, and exposure, silence may feel strange at first. Yet you are allowed to leave a room where loyalty is treated as weakness. You are allowed to cultivate relationships where truth does not need to shout to be respected. The strategy of opposition is often ordinary. Noise fills the day until you cannot hear your own convictions. Fatigue lowers your patience, delay increases your insecurity, and lesser urgencies consume the attention that should have gone toward a necessary decision. You plan to address the pattern, but another task appears. You intend to pray, but the phone keeps lighting up. You promise yourself that you will stop explaining, then send another message because the silence feels unbearable. The cycle survives because it keeps you busy enough to avoid the one honest sentence you do not want to say. This relationship is not functioning as I hoped. You may not need a dramatic confrontation today. You may need sleep, distance, written facts, and a refusal to discuss private matters with people who have repeatedly mishandled them. The enemy of clarity is not always a lie. Sometimes it is exhaustion combined with constant stimulation. A quieter rhythm can expose what frantic activity kept hidden. There comes a point when you stop negotiating with what you already know. This does not mean you possess perfect knowledge. It means you no longer require endless evidence to justify a reasonable boundary. You acknowledge that the person may have good qualities and still be unsafe with certain information. You acknowledge that a relationship may contain affection and still carry manipulation. You acknowledge that your desire to preserve peace may be keeping you in a situation where peace is never reciprocated. The turning point is quiet. You do not necessarily announce it. You simply stop offering the same access, the same explanation, and the same opportunity for someone to repeat the same harm. Your silence becomes less about making them wonder and more about making room for you to hear what wisdom has been saying. This is where the title becomes personal. The danger is not only that someone close might betray you. The danger is that fear of betrayal might convince you to abandon discernment, dignity, and the steady identity God is forming within you. Picture a sealed letter resting inside a wooden desk. The letter has been written, folded, and protected, but no one has opened it. Dust gathers on the outside, and years of movement pass around it. The letter is not empty because it is unopened. Its words remain intact in the hidden place. In the same way, truth can be present before it is publicly acknowledged. Your experience may have been covered by polite conversation, family expectations, professional pressure, or your own hope that things would return to how they were. But hidden does not mean destroyed. The letter waits for the right hands, the right light, and the willingness to read without editing every sentence to preserve an old relationship. You are not the paper, and this is not a claim that your future is predetermined. The image simply gives language to a process. What has been concealed can become understandable when you stop forcing the cover to remain closed. In silence, the contents are not changing. Your capacity to receive them is changing. Inside that desk, the letter has been preserved through seasons it did not choose. Heat may have pressed against the room, rain may have touched the walls, and other papers may have been moved around it. Still, the essential words remained protected. Your character may also have been forming in places where no one praised your restraint. Each time you refused to repeat gossip, each time you answered slowly instead of cruelly, each time you admitted that you needed a boundary, something in you was being preserved. The hidden work matters because public vindication cannot repair an inward collapse. You may want the person who betrayed you to understand exactly what they did. Yet some healing begins when your integrity no longer depends on their confession. The truth can be real even before the person who caused the pain recognizes it. The letter does not need to argue with the desk. It remains what it is. Your task is to protect what has been formed in you until you can carry it into a healthier place. The letter may have been kept beneath other documents because someone feared what would happen if its contents were read. Perhaps the room was governed by old loyalties. Perhaps opening it would require admitting that a trusted arrangement had changed. Perhaps the person holding the key benefited from your uncertainty. Opposition does not always attack through open hostility. Sometimes it covers the truth with busyness, confusion, selective memory, and repeated appeals to your compassion. You are encouraged to focus on intent while the pattern remains untouched. You are told that bringing up the matter will create division, even though the division began when honesty was abandoned. You are invited to keep the peace by carrying the discomfort alone. But a covered letter does not become less true because the room prefers silence. You must be careful, though, not to tear open every envelope in anger. Discernment still matters. Read what is actually present. Let trustworthy counsel help you. Keep your hands steady enough that truth does not become another weapon. Then one day, the desk is moved into the light. The letter is not transformed into something else. It is simply seen. Dust is brushed away, the seal is examined, and the hands holding it recognize that the delay did not erase its meaning. This is what can happen when you stop reacting to every disturbance and begin paying attention to the pattern beneath it. A conversation reveals its real shape. A repeated omission becomes impossible to dismiss. A boundary that once felt cruel begins to feel honest. You may discover that silence was not a punishment for the other person. It was the condition that allowed you to hear yourself again. The letter opens carefully. You do not read it to manufacture an enemy. You read it to understand what you can no longer pretend not to know. There may be grief in those words, but there can also be direction. The truth does not need to shout. It needs to be received. You recognize the letter because its contents explain what your body had been trying to tell you. The uneasiness was not permission to accuse everyone. It was an invitation to pay attention. The distance was not automatically proof of betrayal. It was a reason to observe what happened when you asked a clear question. The silence was not a guaranteed divine message. It was a pause in which your motives, the other person's behavior, and the health of the relationship could become visible. Type the words, "I see it," in the comments, then return to the narration. Let that phrase mean that you are willing to see the truth without exaggerating it and willing to accept the truth without minimizing it. The opened letter does not demand immediate public action. It gives you information. With that information, you can move from confusion toward a faithful response. You can forgive without reopening every door, speak without trying to dominate, and remain silent without secretly planning revenge. Now return from the image to your actual life. Someone close may betray your trust, but you are not required to become a person who betrays your own values in response. You can be hurt and still be measured. You can be disappointed and still be discerning. You can decide that access will change without deciding that love must disappear. The title's instruction to stay silent is not an invitation to suppress your voice forever. It is a call to refuse premature speech while your heart is still trying to turn pain into power. When the right moment comes, you may need to speak plainly. You may need to say what happened, what it changed, and what will be different from now on. But let your words come from a settled place. Truth spoken from steadiness can create a boundary. Truth spoken from fury often creates another battlefield. The distinction is not whether you feel deeply. It is whether your feelings are driving the entire vehicle. One practical step is to create a short pause before responding to any message that activates fear or anger. Put the phone down, take several slow breaths, read the message again later, preferably after sleep, food, or a walk. Then write a private account of the facts using simple language. Do not include motives you cannot verify. Do not add every past wound unless it genuinely belongs to the present issue. Ask yourself what outcome you are seeking. Is it information, accountability, distance, repair, or closure? Each purpose requires a different response. If you want information, ask a direct question. If you need accountability, name the specific action and its effect. If you need distance, you may not need a long explanation. If you hope for repair, look for consistent responsibility rather than a dramatic apology. This practice does not guarantee that the other person will respond well. It protects you from allowing their response to determine whether your own communication remains honest and dignified. A second practice is to review access, not only emotion. Ask what this person knows, what decisions they influence, and which parts of your inner life you have placed in their hands. You do not have to make every change at once. Begin with one concrete adjustment. Stop sharing information that has repeatedly become public. Move sensitive conversations to a setting where you feel safe and unhurried. Invite a mature, trustworthy person to help you evaluate the pattern without feeding suspicion. If the relationship involves work, money, housing, or legal responsibilities, keep records and seek qualified guidance rather than relying only on spiritual impressions. Faith does not require carelessness. Prayer and practical wisdom belong together. You can trust God while locking the door, clarifying the agreement, saving the message, or declining the invitation. A spiritual life that ignores ordinary wisdom is not deeper. It is simply more vulnerable to confusion. Limits can be a form of mercy. They protect you from resentment and protect the other person from receiving access they have not learned to handle. A closed door does not always mean permanent rejection. Sometimes it creates the only conditions in which honesty can become possible. A pause in communication can interrupt the pattern of Ekai.